From fear to fearlessness, Gary stared at the map as if he had no idea what he was looking at. Nothing about it made sense to him. It was like a mass of scribble on a page. A foreign language he couldn't decipher. "Where the hell am I?" he said. He turned his head to look out his driver's side window just as a massive caravan of 16-wheeler semis hurled past him going at least 90 to 100 miles per hour. The gust of wind that whipped off them was so fierce, so strong, it made his rusty, 1985 Subaru nearly flip over on its side. "This is insane," he said to himself, as his car struggled to keep its tires on the ground. "I can't believe this is happening. Not now. Why now?" He reached over and turned on his hazards. Sheets of heavy, intense rain, louder than any rain he'd never heard, beat down on his windshield. Gary covered his ears. The sound was deafening, maddening, terrifying, as if the raindrops falling from the sky were billions of fists beating down, pummeling him from above, viciously intent on breaking through and killing him. Had it not been for the endless river of white lights speeding towards him, the red lights zooming past him, and the two, dim, crummy lights in his car, it would have been pitch black. He would have been in complete darkness. Fear started to creep in. His heart, already weak and feeble, began to pound. His gut started turning in circles. His breathing got shallow. His hands went clammy. His mouth went dry. He started to shake uncontrollably. "Look at yourself, Gary," he said to himself. He pulled down the sun visor and looked at himself in the mirror. "Look at how pitiful you are." He ran his hands across his balding, 53-year-old, sweat-covered head. "You have no idea where you are, and no idea where you're going?" He gulped. Vomit crept to the top of his throat. "When are you going to get your shit together, Gary? When are you going to figure it out? Look at everyone else. They all know where they're going. They all have a job. They all have a purpose. They're all headed somewhere. To something, to someone. You're the only one broken down on the side of road going nowhere. You're the only one who's lost. While you're sitting here, in an old rusty car, the rest of the world's passing you by in Corvettes, Mustangs, and Porsches." He looked to the side again. Fear and humiliation clouded his eyes. He could barely see anything. "You should be ashamed of yourself." He looked down in despair. "You better hurry up and figure it out, old man. Time's ticking." He pushed up his thick, brown-rimmed glasses, and wiped the nervous sweat off his brow. Then, after taking a shallow, utterly depthless breath, he looked down at the map and tried, once again, to figure out where he was. Desperately, he tried to focus. Desperately, he tried to quit shaking and ignore the rain beating down and the traffic racing past him, but all to no avail. The intensity of his desperation only made it worse. After a minute or two, the lights in his car began to flicker. He looked up at them. "Don't you dare," he said out loud to them, "don't you even dare." In an instant, they, and his hazards, went out, and the darkness came crashing in. Then the panic set in. Uncontrollable panic. Unimaginable panic. Panic so commanding, so oppressive, and so suffocating, that he felt like he was being crushed beneath the weight of a colossal boulder. He couldn't move. He couldn't breathe. He couldn't think. He couldn't even scream. He was utterly consumed with fear. "I can't do this anymore," Gary whispered to himself, as tears started welling up behind his eyes. "I've tried so hard, for so damn long, to make something of myself, something of my life, but no matter how hard I try, no matter what I do, I always fuck up. I always fail. Look at me, I'm no one. I'm just a nameless, faceless, fearful old man, that nobody knows, that nobody cares about, with no money, no family, no friends, no job, no nothing, sitting in an old, broken-down car on the side of a 4-lane highway. Somewhere in the middle of nowhere, during a storm, in the middle of the fucking night, scared to death. It can't get worse than this. I'm not doing it anymore. I'm finished." Then, he laid his head back against the seat, closed his eyes, and prayed for God to take his life. No sooner had he prayed his prayer, than he fell into a very, very deep sleep. As he slept, he dreamed. In the dream, he saw himself standing on the top of a high mountain, looking out over the world. He was younger. Maybe 25 or 30, and stronger, much stronger. His hair was thick and healthy. His clothes were new and fresh. He was wearing a brand new black coat and dark, brown leather boots that went up over his ankles. His coat was zipped, and his boots were laced up methodically. He had the look of a mountaineer, a very seasoned, knowledgeable, and well-equipped mountaineer. The gaze in his eyes was purposeful, expectant, filled with hope.
"At the edge, huh? How'd I get here?" Mary looked around, but everything around her seemed to be out of focus. Her head felt woozy and like it was being spilt open. "How did I get up here?" she thought. In a distance, she saw a blurry image of a person. Mary shook her head, but the sharp pain run through her head, reminding her of its presence. She tried to get up and quickly dropped back to the ground like a bag of potatoes. She took a deep breath, closed her eyes and tried to calm herself. When she opened her eyes, she could see relatively clear. Mary turned her head to the direction of the person she had seen earlier. It was a man, and he was standing at the edge of the rooftop. She looked around, a cold wind brushing the surface of her skin as her curly hair blew backwards. Her focus returned to the man standing at the edge. He was wearing a black plain t-shirt and black faded jeans. He seemed to be looking down at the cars moving below on the road. What is he doing? Feeling her energy coming back, Mary lifted herself up, using the wall she was leaning against for support. Her legs were shaking but she managed to gain control. Hey, she shouted, startling the man who swiftly turned to face her. He had a long cut across his right eye. Mary wondered if he could see with that eye. His skin was pale and tears were rolling down his cheeks. Mary began to move closer but the man stepped back, and this time he was at the very edge. Mary paused on her tracks, clearly something was not right. She opened her mouth to say something but froze when the man smiled. His eyes were locked on Mary's. It was like as if he was saying goodbye without saying a word. Sensing what was coming next, Mary rushed towards the man. No. Wait, but he fell backwards. Mary shot up from her bed, like she had just returned from the dead. Her breathing was labored and her pajamas were sticking on her body. She held her hands to her chest. It was just a dream, breathing in slowly to compose herself. Strange, she thought. What was that just now? Sun rays were piercing through her curtains. She moved towards her window and opened it. She loved the feeling of the morning sun against her skin. She closed her eyes and took it all in, but the image of the man's face in her dream flashed in her mind. Alarmed, she quickly opened her eyes. I need a shower. Mary decided to go to a nearby cafe for coffee. She had a lot of deadlines to meet and so she came along with her laptop. Lately, she had been occupied with her online classes with the upcoming exams occupying most her mind. She opened her emails and begun looking through them. A waiter came to her table, but she was so cooked up in sorting her emails that she didn't notice the waiter standing next to her table. Excuse ma'am, a calm manly voice spoke, getting Mary's attention. Oh, sorry, Mary giggled lightly. When she looked up to the waiter, her jaw dropped. She quickly covered her mouth with her hand. The waiter twitched his eyes wondering if the lady was shocked by the big cut across his eye. I get that a lot, said the waiter in a sarcastic tone. Sorry, realizing she had offended him. Where's the bathroom? Oh, just go down straight and turn to your right. Mary rose up, thank you, and moved past the waiter. He watched her as she disappeared down the hall and shook his head. Am I that scary? Letting out a sigh, Mary splashed water on her face. It is him. It is definitely him, the man in my dream. Oh God, am I dreaming again? What's going on? She looked herself in the mirror and slapped her cheeks hard with both hands. She was clearly awake. She returned to her table and looked at the waiter from a distance as he served another table and disappeared to the kitchen. He later reappeared talking to another waiter. Mary couldn't make out what they were saying but she got a hint that he was leaving. I guess his shift is over. Mary decided to follow the waiter as he left the cafe. She quickly packed her laptop in her bag and followed the waiter out, keeping some distance. She noticed that he had changed his clothes. Wearing the same black t-shirt and black jeans she had seen in her dream. He walked amongst a crowd of people and Mary struggled to keep up with him. He stopped to cross the road and then disappeared at a nearby alley. Mary reached the alley but she could see him anymore. Where has he disappeared to now? Mary held her waist. What is the meaning of all this? Why am I even following him? She turned to walk back when all of a sudden she felt a sharp pain on the back of her head. Then, all of a sudden, everything turned black. Mary opened her eyes slowly, blinking twice in the process. There was a ringing sound going through her head as she sat upright. Ah gosh, this hurts. She looked around and instantly recognized where she was. Oh God, no. Mary could hear the beat of her heart as she saw the waiter standing at the edge of the building rooftop.